Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Creepypasta Campfire. I'm your host, Robot. Ninja couldn't be here today, and today I will be reading a Fire Emblem story titled Broken Henry. Fire Emblem. It's a wonderful series of tactical RPG genre games that's been around with us since 1990, or at least that's what I heard. To be honest, I like a lot of people. First heard of Fire Emblem through Super Smash Bros. Rally for the Nintendo GameCube, and the only game I have in the franchise is Fire Emblem Awakening, which came out for the Nintendo 3DS in Japan in 2012, 2013 for Europe and the US. Now, one thing I gotta say, this guy just using commas correctly, I gotta give him some credit already, whoever this is. I honestly love the game with a passion. I couldn't put it down ever since I got it for my 19th birthday. At least I wouldn't have if I didn't also have college to worry about. I was 20, and I still had yet to pass the one chapter where the main character, Crom, and the rest of his army known as the Shepherds were about to kill King Randral, who has been the main antagonist for all of what I've played of the game. Spoilers, by what seemed to be sheer dumb luck, I managed to have an entire week free of assignments to do outside of my classes, so I took all my free time that week to finish the game. I finally defeated Gandrel with my avatar, who I named Mackenzie, after my own name. After that, the game went swimmingly. Once I had reached chapter 13, I officially met face to screen. I love that. Was my favorite new character, a Pagan dark mage named Henry. His dialogue was a riot to read, and he was powerful as all heck. However, I was disappointed because I wanted to have my avatar Mackenzie marry him, since you can do that if I didn't already have her marry Stahl, who was my favorite before Henry came along. Not to mention that everyone else he was compatible with was already married, even one character who was introduced in the immediately previous chapter. There was a lot of horde battles I had to deal with before Henry's chapter, so that's how Henry couldn't marry the character introduced before him. So I guess Henry's gonna break because he's lonely, right? Regardless of my disappointment, I continued the game without pairing him up, and everything went just fine. The Shepherds had defeated the true main villain, Grima, spoilers, the credits rolled, and every character's ending was displayed, except for Henry's. After the final ending played, an odd scene began. It was Henry in a moonlight forest. He appeared to be crying? This was very odd, not only because I never heard of this scene appearing anywhere in the game to begin with, but also that this was very unlike Henry to openly cry like this. He was usually cruel with a smile on his face the whole time. Suddenly Henry's dialogue began. Sigh. Well, Grim is gone, so that happy ending happened. Sniff. But where's my happy ending? He had to be referring to how I wasn't able to pair him up. It just got odder as one of his favorite animals, a crow, attacked him. Ouch, now even the crows hate me. Sobbing. It was just plain surreal. There was no way to skip the scene. Believe me, I tried. I bit my lip as Henry spoke again. One thing I have to say though is this guy doesn't really seem to know how to use. Never mind. He pulled it off. Never mind. That was just me messing that up. This isn't my fault. It's hers. It's all her dang fault. If it wasn't for what she did, no, what she didn't do, I wouldn't be like this. Suddenly, it cut to what an in-game battlefield would look like. The only characters on the screen were Henry and three enemies. Henry spoke in saying, I know what must be done now. Henry moved on his own, unarmed, all the way to where the enemies were. They were a swordmaster, a sage, and a berserker. The three of them slowly whittled Henry's HP away until it was the empty amount of 0. I was afraid and confused at this point. Suddenly, Henry spoke one last time. Is this what you wanted? Are you happy now, Mackenzie? My eyes widened once he finished speaking, and his sprite faded away slower than normal. The game then cut back black and Henry's ending appeared. This is your fault, Mackenzie. You denied me the one thing I wanted most. A happy ending. Take that as you will. Now I'm dead as a doornail, thanks to you. What the heck was that? I stared at the screen as it returned to the title. I shook it off and thought it was just in my head. I heard I was able to go back to my save file to replay the game from the point I saved at before defeating Grima. But for some reason when I tried to, a text box appeared saying, you cannot play this file anymore. It is all your fault. Now I knew this wasn't in my head. I wanted to shriek at the top of my lungs, but I couldn't risk disturbing my roommate, who was napping in another room. So I simply deleted my file, as if there was no other empty slots left. One was taken up by my 16-year-old brother before I went to college, and the other by my roommate, as she loved the game as much as I did, but didn't have enough money for her own copy. So let me get this straight. Some oddity happens in your copy of Fire Emblem Awakening and you delete it. Good job. Luckily I deleted and replayed the game. I still had 3 days of my free week left and managed to get to chapter 13 again by the time I had to. I decided to change some pairings around so I could have my avatar, who I again named Mackenzie, marry Henry. I was ecstatic about this moment, as I would see Henry as himself again. Or so I hoped. That hope turned out to be false when Chrome's portrait was replaced by my avatars and Henry's portrait showed himself on the screen. Henry was far from himself. Parts of his cape were burned off, his skin was slightly paler than usual, and parts of his clothes and the flesh beneath them were brutally cut. He had a large stab wound through his chest. His wounds had large stains of blood. The mark of a crow's scratch was scarred on his right eye, and he was crying bloody tears. Blood, guys. But that's not the creepiest part. Unlike normal, Henry's eyes were open, and those dead-looking, violet eyes were staring right at me. Not at my avatar, but at real-life me. And this is how you managed to fuck it all up. Good job. Then he spoke, definitely not in his typical Sherry fashion. "Oh, it's you. I have something to ask you." "How could you? You let me die." Then you started everything over like it never freaking happened. I was taken aback by this. Was Henry really shouting at me? Oh wait, I said this wrong. Freaking happen! I was taken aback by this. Was Henry really shouting at me, breaking the fourth wall for something that happened in a completely different file, for something that shouldn't, in all caps, have happened in the first place? His words made me tear up for some reason. "Is that crying, I see? Good, because now you realize how at fault you are. This is just a game." Now I was freaked out. Now I knew that this wasn't the avatar he was talking to, but you already knew that. Whatever. "I didn't know, Henry. I didn't know," I said without even knowing that I said it. I'm starting to think that this guy, actually loves Henry, not the avatar, like the main character, you know? "Your words mean nothing to me now. Now you will pay." Suddenly the game went to black. Just after Henry's dialogue, then it cut to the file select screen. Nothing was changed on my brother's file or my roommate's, but the name on mine was no longer Mackenzie. It said defect. Defect, I thought. What the heck does that mean? I clicked on it and the file started as if chapter 13 were over. All of the characters were there, even Lucina, who would have appeared at the end of the chapter, but their sprites and portraits had depressed looks on their faces. Except Henry. His sprite was normal, and his portrait was the same as when he was just saying how it was my fault, in quotes, and how my words meant nothing. The only difference was now he also had a twisted, malicious grin, practically stitched on his face. He was still crying those blood-red tears and still looking straight at me. I held my hand over my mouth to keep from screeching and awakening my roommate. Awakening? Fire Emblem Awakening? Whatever. I scrolled over my avatar, who was completely normal, except for one thing. Her name was the same as the file when I just clicked on it. Defect. I closed out on my character's roster, only to be confronted with another scene of chapter 13 setting. Henry's portrait appeared once again. He said, "You really are no more than a defect you've toyed with me, with all the shepherds for far too long." Then he said one last thing that felt as if it was cutting me like a knife. "I am broken, Henry, and now you will pay with a life." The game quickly shut itself off by doing who knows what. I practically threw my 3DS on the table and ran to my room to cry. It's just a game, bro. I woke up in the middle of that night, and the bangs of my shirt and burned hair falling in front of my face, as I had a nightmare about Henry. In it, he in front of my eyes murdered my dear parents, my brother, and my roommate, followed by him walking over to me and gutting me like a newly caught fish. Luckily, I was awake and alive, but I could have sworn I was being watched. Suddenly I heard a loud yet quickly silent scream from the other room where my roommate was. I rushed out of my room over to where the scream came from, only to find that her throat had been slit and her hands sliced off, as a mysterious piece of purple fabric was located next to my roommate's cadaver. Ooey, fancy here, which was extremely hot when I felt her skin, as if by fire magic. As I sobbed over the loss of my best friend and roommate, I examined the fabric to find a pale gold colored eye on the other side. Then I turned around and noticed a note on top of my 3DS that read, I told you that you would pay, but I never said it would be your all caps life. Nah, ha, ha. Broken Henry. Signed Broken Henry. I chuckled, then broke out into a psychotic laughter. I think that Broken Henry officially broke me. I managed to hide the body of my now deceased roommate in the closet, but I couldn't clean up the blood from her wounds because before the cops showed up, I had absolutely no idea why they came or who called them, but I know that it meant trouble. They took only the fabric and my 3DS as evidence, but oddly, not the note. I was tried for murder the next day and deemed insane. I'm in the madhouse right now, relaying all of this to an attendant who agreed to type all this up due to me being in a straitjacket. That's the plot twist, guys. She was always insane. If I'm being honest, every night in the darkness of my plush white room, I swear I can see Henry with his dead-looking violet-colored eyes, complemented with a twisted, malicious, almost stitched smile, and hear him whispering to me, "It's fun being broken, isn't it, Mackenzie?" Alright, there's one comment. Yeah, 10 out of 10 spook. That's the one comment. Uh, Here's what I'll say. Technically speaking, it is pretty well written, especially in comparison to things I've read on this channel. But the one problem is that it kind of, jumps the shark at a certain point, and it kind of, like, it starts out a bit okay. I mean, it's a lost episode. I mean, not a lost episode. The video game Creepypasta, and, they always kind of pull this off. And it kind of felt like it was going in an interesting route, but then it kind of just became, oh no, the game fucked with my life. And, I give it a 7 out of 10, maybe a 6. Maybe you should read it, I guess. Well, this has been Creepypasta Campfire, and I am out of here.